The Boy in the Box, America's Unknown Child. The Discovery in the Woods. February 25th, 1957. A cold winter morning in Fox Chase, a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Philadelphia. Among the bare trees and tangled brush near Susquehanna Road, a young man walking through the woods stumbles upon something strange. A cardboard box, weather-worn, with the faint logo of a baby's bassinet still visible on its side. He moves closer. He looks inside, and what he finds is the lifeless body of a little boy, naked, bruised, malnourished, wrapped in a thin flannel blanket. A haircut had been recently done. Poorly. His fingernails were trimmed. His small hands rested gently on his stomach, as if someone tried to position him with care. There were no obvious signs of identity. No wallet, no tags, no name. Just a broken child in a box. And nobody came looking for him. Not that day, not that week, not for decades. He would become known only as America's Unknown Child. And the mystery of who he was and who took his life would become one of the longest-running unsolved cases in U.S. history. But to understand why this case still haunts so many, we have to go back, not just to the discovery, but to the dozens of theories, false confessions, and obsessive investigators who gave their lives to try and give him a name. Let's begin where everything started, with the box in the woods and the silence that followed. A child. No one reported missing. When police arrived on the scene, they treated it like a homicide. But there was a problem. There was no blood, no clear cause of death, no witnesses. The boy's body was clean, but there were signs of severe abuse. His head was covered in contusions, particularly around the crown and the sides. Internal bleeding pointed to blunt force trauma, but there were no defensive wounds, no struggle. Had he been unconscious when he died? Or too weak to fight back? Medical examiners estimated the boy to be between 3 and 7 years old. Most agreed, likely 4 to 5. He had blue eyes, light brown hair, and he weighed just 30 pounds. That's far below average, even for the youngest estimate. His ribs protruded. His limbs were thin. There were signs of long-term malnutrition. This wasn't a child who had just recently been neglected. He had been suffering for a long time. The cardboard box that held his body came from a local store, J.C. Penney. It once contained a baby's bassinet. Police traced it back to one location, but dozens of those boxes had been sold. Records weren't kept. It was a dead end. Flyers were printed. Thousands of posters showing a sketch of the boy's face were mailed across the country. They even included morgue photos, carefully staged, the boy dressed in clothes donated by local funeral homes. Still, no one came forward. No missing child reports matched his description. How could that be? Unless someone had made sure he wouldn't be missed. He never let the boy go. The boy was buried in a small grave in Philadelphia's Ivy Hill Cemetery. His tombstone simply read, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." Detectives stood by that grave, month after month, year after year, hoping someone, anyone, would walk in with answers. But silence is heavy, and this case became heavier with time. But there were those who refused to let it go. One man, Remington Bristow, a medical examiner's office employee, would become obsessed. He spent over 4 decades chasing every rumor, every lead, every whisper connected to the boy in the box. And in the 1960s, Bristow found something he couldn't shake: a foster home, not far from the site where the boy was found. The house was large, run by a couple who cared for children. Bristow attended an estate sale there and saw something that chilled him: a baby's bassinet and blankets that looked just like the one found with the boy. Could it have come from that home? Was the child one of theirs? Bristow was convinced. He built an entire theory around that family, even claiming the boy may have been the illegitimate son of the foster home's stepdaughter. But police couldn't prove anything. No evidence, no confession, no arrest. And eventually, Bristow passed away, with more questions than answers. The psychic, the map, and the mannequin. In the 1980s, the case took a strange turn. A psychic, whose name was never released publicly, contacted Philadelphia police and claimed she had a vision. She described the exact location where the body had been found and led them to a house she had never seen. It was the same foster home Remington Bristow had obsessed over. But this wasn't evidence. It was intuition, and detectives, skeptical but desperate, followed the lead, only to end up where they had before, nowhere provable. Years passed. The case grew colder, but interest didn't disappear. It evolved. As the internet age came, forums lit up with amateur investigators sharing theories. Some claimed the boy had been raised like a girl, that his haircut had been a rushed attempt to disguise his identity. Others believed he was sold, abused, then discarded when his body couldn't hide the truth anymore. And then came the theory of the mannequin. A college student reported seeing a box in the same woods weeks earlier, but thought it was just a discarded mannequin. If only she had looked closer. If only someone had acted sooner. Maybe the boy would have had a name before becoming a headline. The DNA revolution begins. By the early 2000s, the boy's case had been reopened multiple times. Each time, hopes were high. Each time, leads fizzled out. But then, science started catching up to the mystery. In 1998, his body was exhumed for the first time. Technicians took samples of his teeth and bones, hoping to extract DNA. At the time, DNA testing wasn't what it is today. The results were minimal, frustrating. Still, it was a start. In 2019, over 60 years after his death, the boy's body was exhumed again, this time with better tools. And this time it worked. His DNA profile was finally strong enough to be submitted to genealogical databases. A new kind of investigation had begun, not just looking for missing persons reports, but for distant cousins, people who might share fragments of his DNA. Slowly, piece by piece, researchers at the VDOC Society and investigators at the Philadelphia Police Department started building a family tree. Names, connections, clues hidden in bloodlines. After decades of silence, the boy was finally starting to speak. The name he never had. In December of 2022, 65 years after the boy was found, something changed. After thousands of hours of genealogical research, After testing and retesting DNA samples, they had a name. His name was Joseph Augustus Zarelli, born January 13th, 1953, just 4 years old when he died. His parents were identified, but their names were not released to the public. The police cited privacy, fear, perhaps shame. But Joseph's identity was confirmed. For the first time, the boy in the box was no longer anonymous, no longer lost. A child who had been buried, erased from the system, now had his name restored. His birth certificate was updated. His gravestone changed. It now reads, Joseph Augustus Zarelli, January 13th, 1953, America's unknown child. Unanswered questions. Giving Joseph a name didn't solve the case. It solved who he was, but not what happened to him, not who killed him, not why he was never reported missing. Investigators confirmed that Joseph had siblings, people who had lived, and maybe still live, never knowing he even existed. His parents were once again contacted, questioned, but no charges were filed. The case is still open. And Joseph's short life still exists mostly in fragments: a birth certificate, a grave, a cardboard box, and a million broken pieces in between. The legacy of a lost child. Joseph's story became more than a crime scene. It became a symbol, a reminder of the thousands of children who vanish without justice, of the cold cases that fade from headlines, but never from the hearts of those who work them. His case inspired generations of investigators, journalists, genealogists, even strangers online who never gave up on a boy they never met. He was the face of the unknown. And even after his name was found, that legacy lives on. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children still refers to him by his original title, America's Unknown Child, not as a denial of his name, but as an honor. Because for decades, Joseph stood in for all the nameless, faceless victims waiting to be found. And now that he has been, the question is, who else is still waiting? The faces behind the files. Cold cases don't solve themselves. Behind every breakthrough, there's a human being who refused to let go, and Joseph's case had many. Remington Bristow, the medical examiner's assistant who spent decades chasing shadows. He died never knowing the boy's name, but his relentless pursuit helped keep the case alive. The Vidocq Society, a group of forensic experts, detectives, and profilers who take on cold cases no one else will. They took Joseph's case to heart. They used every modern tool at their disposal, including forensic genealogy, mitochondrial DNA, and database tracing. And then there's the Philadelphia Police Department. After decades of dead ends, they never officially closed the file. They believed someone out there knew something, and they still believe that today. A case that still whispers. Even with a name, even with a grave marked in full. Something about Joseph's story still feels incomplete. Maybe it's the silence from the people who should have spoken up. Or maybe it's the way his tiny body was left alone, discarded like trash. There's something unbearably haunting about a child who dies anonymously, A life so small, so silent, that it could have disappeared forever. But it didn't, because someone noticed. A passerby in the woods, a detective with too many questions, a forensic genealogist with a laptop and time. In the end, Joseph's story isn't just about tragedy. It's about resistance, the refusal to let the unknown stay forgotten, the fight to give a name to the nameless, and the quiet power of people who keep looking, even when there are no answers. The unknown child is no longer alone. Today, visitors still come to Joseph's grave. They bring flowers, small toys, notes that simply say, "You are loved." He was a child failed by the systems meant to protect him, a child whose pain went unseen until it was too late. But now, he is no longer invisible. His case remains open. Investigators continue to search for the person or people who ended his life. Justice may still come, or it may not, but the world knows his name. And for a boy once buried without it, that matters. That means something. This is the American Mysteries Archives, and this was the story of Joseph Augustus Zarelli, America's unknown child.
Subscribe for more chilling mysteries. Thanks for being here. See you in the next time.